The silence of our suburban villa, which I had spent my entire youth cultivating, shattered at 2 in the morning. A voice on the other end screamed in agony. "Mark, my water broke. Get to Memorial Hospital right now." My husband turned pale, swearing she was just a delusional stalker. I almost believed him until I saw his evasive eyes. This was no accident. It was a perfect replacement plan nurtured for 9 long months right behind my back. My name is Sarah. At 34 years old, I had curated my life with the same architectural precision I applied to my projects as the creative director at Prism Line. Tonight was supposed to be the pinnacle of that careful design. We were celebrating our 5th wedding anniversary, and the air in our master bedroom still held the heavy, expensive scent of burnt beeswax candles and the lingering warmth of our bodies. I lay there, tracing the shadow of the oak tree against the curtains, believing that the silence of our suburban villa was the sound of contentment. Mark lay beside me, his breathing rhythmic and deep to the outside world, and even to me for the last 1,825 days. He was the model husband. He was handsome, attentive, and seemingly responsible. Whenever the topic of children arose, which it did with increasing frequency as my friends posted ultrasound photos, Mark would hold my hand with a practiced solemnity. "Not yet, honey," he would say, his brow furrowing just enough to look concerned. "You know I want a family more than anything, but with the market the way it is, we need to be secure. Just give it a little more time." I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I trusted his financial acumen. I trusted him. That trust began to fracture at exactly 2 in the morning. The sudden, jarring vibration of Mark's cell phone against the nightstand shattered the stillness. It buzzed once, twice, 3 times. I shifted, reaching out to touch his shoulder. Mark Who is calling at this hour. He woke with a start, his hand shooting out to silence the device with a speed that felt instinctive, almost defensive. It's nobody. Probably a robocall. Go back to sleep. Sarah." He turned the phone face down, but the room had barely returned to darkness when the landline on the other side of the room began to scream. The sound was archaic and piercing. We almost never used that line. Mark froze. I sat up, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Before he could stop me, I reached over and lifted the receiver. "Hello." I expected static, or perhaps a wrong number. Instead, a guttural, terrifying scream tore through the speaker, followed by a voice thick with agony. "Mark, my water broke. You have to help me. I'm terrified. Get to Memorial Hospital right now." The line went dead. I sat there, the receiver still pressed to my ear, the dial tone mocking the sudden silence. I turned to look at Mark. Even in the dim light, I could see the blood had drained entirely from his face. He looked like a ghost. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice trembling. She said her water broke. She asked for you." Mark scrambled out of bed, nearly tripping over the sheets. He began grabbing his clothes from the floor, his movements erratic and frantic. "It's Amanda," he stammered, pulling his trousers on with shaking hands. "I told you about her, the ex-girlfriend from college. She's schizophrenic. She's been stalking me for years. Sarah, she's delusional. She sounded like she was in labor." "Mark," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "That's part of the delusion," he shouted, his voice cracking. "She thinks we're married. She thinks she's having my baby. I have to go stop her. If she shows up here, she could be dangerous. I have to go down there and handle her before she causes a scene." He shoved his feet into his loafers without socks. He grabbed his keys and looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading, yet shifting away from mine. "Go back to sleep. Sarah, please, do not worry about this. I will fix it. I need to make sure she doesn't come near you. He ran out of the room. A moment later, I heard the front door slam, followed by the roar of his engine. I did not go back to sleep. I stood by the window, pulling the curtain back just in time to see his taillights disappear down the street. He was driving fast. Too fast. My intuition, honed by years of managing complex construction sites and reading difficult clients, began to scream louder than the phone had. You do not drive toward a dangerous stalker at 80 miles per hour. You drive that fast when you are terrified of losing something you love. You drive that fast when you are a father. I turned away from the window and looked at the landline unit. The message light was blinking. She had left a voicemail before I picked up. My fingers felt numb as I pressed the play button. The voice filled the room again. It was not the manic rambling of a woman in the throes of a psychotic break. It was a voice trembling with raw, undeniable biological fear. "Mark, please. It hurts so much. I can't do this alone. You promised. You promised you'd be here." The recording ended. I stood in the center of the bedroom I had designed to be our sanctuary. The walls felt like they were closing in. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was heavy with lies. I could not stay here. I could not lie in those silk sheets and wait for a lie to return home. I walked to the closet and pulled out a dark hoodie and a pair of jeans. If Mark was going to handle the situation, then I was going to witness exactly how he handled it. I grabbed my keys. I was going to Memorial Hospital. I pulled my baseball cap low over my eyes and adjusted the medical mask until it covered the bridge of my nose. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as I stepped through the sliding glass doors of Memorial Hospital. The sterile smell of antiseptic and floor wax hit me instantly, a scent that usually signaled safety, but tonight smelled only of betrayal. I kept my head down, trying to blend in with the few weary visitors wandering the halls at this ungodly hour. I spotted him almost immediately. Mark was standing at the main reception desk. He was not gesturing wildly or demanding security to remove a harasser as he had claimed he would be. Instead, he was leaning over the high counter, his posture hunched with evident anxiety. I slipped behind a large, leafy potted plant near the waiting area, straining to hear his voice over the low hum of the hospital ventilation. "I need to get back in there," Mark said, his voice tight not with anger, but with desperation. The nurse behind the counter typed something into her computer and looked up over her glasses. "I just need to confirm the information for the birth certificate and admission, sir. Name of the father." My breath hitched in my throat. This was the moment he would deny it. This was the moment he would say he was just a bystander. "Mark Sullivan," he replied clearly, without a second of hesitation. I am the father." The confession hit me harder than a physical blow, but I forced my feet to move. Mark turned and rushed toward the maternity ward. I followed at a safe distance, my sneakers silent on the linoleum floor. He disappeared into a delivery room at the end of the hall. The blinds were drawn, but they were old and misaligned, leaving a distinct gap near the center. I crept closer, pressing my back against the cold wall before sliding into position to peer through the crack. The scene inside was a domestic tableau that sickened me. Mark was not fending off a crazy woman. He was holding her hand. He was stroking the damp hair away from her forehead with a tenderness that made my stomach churn. "You are doing so great, Mandy," I heard him murmur, his voice muffled by the glass but unmistakable. "Just a little more. I am right here with you." Amanda, the woman he had painted as a delusional monster, looked up at him with exhausted adoration. And then I saw it. Resting against her clavicle, rising and falling with her heavy breathing, was a silver teardrop pendant. I froze. I had found the receipt for that exact necklace in his trouser pocket 3 months ago. "It is for Mom's birthday. Don't spoil the surprise." "Okay," he had told me, flashing that boyish grin I loved. His mother hated silver. Suddenly, a sharp cry pierced the air, followed by the wet, squalling sound of new life. The doctor lifted a small, red infant into the air. I watched my husband's face transform. He broke down. He was weeping, his shoulders shaking with a raw, unfiltered joy I had never seen him display in our 5 years of marriage. He looked at that baby as if it were the only thing in the world that mattered. My hand trembled violently as I raised my phone. I silenced the shutter and aimed the lens through the gap in the blinds. Click. I captured the image of Mark kissing Amanda's forehead while the nurse placed the baby in her arms. Click. I captured the image of him cutting the umbilical cord, his face wet with tears. As the digital images saved to my gallery, the hot panic in my chest began to cool, hardening into a block of ice. I did not storm into the room. I did not scream. I lowered the phone and stepped back from the window. The Sarah who had driven here in a frenzy was gone. In her place was someone much colder and far more dangerous. I walked back to my car with a steady stride. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The dots connected themselves with terrifying speed. The monthly weekend business trips to Chicago. The mysterious cash withdrawals he claimed were for client dinners. The way he had become protective of his phone. It was never about work. He had been building a second life while I worked 60 hours a week to fund our first one. I started the engine and drove home. The house was dark and silent when I returned. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I walked straight to the study where Mark's laptop sat on the mahogany desk. He was so arrogant, so sure of his deception, that he hadn't even shut it down. I opened the lid. The screen glowed to life, still logged in. I sat down in his leather chair and cracked my knuckles. It was time to see exactly what my husband had been building with my money. The blue light of the laptop screen cut through the darkness of my study, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I was not crying. Tears were a luxury for women who still had hope, and I had none left. I navigated to Mark's personal email account. He had always been careless with passwords, using the same variation of his favorite baseball team and his birth year for everything, a security flaw I had warned him about a dozen times. Now, it was my key to the kingdom of his deceit. I bypassed the inbox and went straight to his archived folders. Buried beneath tax returns and car insurance documents was a folder simply titled Project New Beginnings. My finger hovered over the trackpad. It sounded like a work proposal, perhaps a freelance consulting gig he had mentioned. I clicked it. It was not work. It was a blueprint for a life that did not include me. The folder contained subfolders labeled Housing, Nursery, and Legal. I opened Housing first. It was full of links to apartment listings in the suburbs, specifically in districts with high-rated elementary schools. There were receipts for furniture, a crib, a changing table, a rocking chair, all delivered to an address I did not recognize. Then I opened Legal. My breath hissed through my teeth. It was a timeline, a meticulous, color-coded schedule detailing asset separation and a draft for filing divorce papers, dated for 3 months from now. I switched tabs to his online banking. As a financial planner, Mark handled our investments. I trusted him implicitly. I was a fool. I dug through the transaction history of our joint account and found a pattern of small, irregular transfers to an external account at a bank we did not use. $200 here, $500 there, just enough to blend in with grocery bills and utility payments. I hacked my way into that external account using the password reset feature sent to his email. The history went back 2 years. This was not a drunken mistake or a momentary lapse of judgment. This was a parallel life. He had been funding Amanda for 24 months, paying for her rent, her car, and her prenatal vitamins, all while telling me we could not afford a vacation to Italy. Then I saw the transaction that made my vision blur with rage. 2 weeks ago, there was a withdrawal of $50,000 from my personal retirement fund. I stared at the screen, my nails digging into the leather armrest. Mark had listed it in his monthly report to me as a diversified bond purchase. The bank statement told a different story. It was a cashier's check made out to a title company. He had used my life savings, money I had earned working 60 hours a week at the architecture firm, to put a down payment on a house for his mistress. I opened the messaging app linked to his phone backup. The most recent conversation with Mandy was at the top. I scrolled back, reading their exchange from yesterday. "I hate that you are with her tonight," Amanda had written. Mark's reply was instantaneous. "Baby, you know it is all for show. Just hold on a few more months. Once you recover from the birth, I will find a reason to divorce that bitch and we will have everything. The house, the money, all of it. That bitch." I stared at the words. I was that bitch. The woman who paid the mortgage on the roof over his head. The woman who ironed his shirts. The woman who had loved him. I did not scream. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a 2-terabyte external hard drive. With steady hands, I began the transfer. I downloaded every email, every bank statement, every incriminating photo, and every text message. I printed hard copies of the financial theft and the Project New Beginnings timeline. I took screenshots of the chat logs where he conspired to leave me penniless. By the time the progress bar hit 100%, the sun was beginning to bleed gray light through the window. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Mark. "Timestamp 5 in the morning. I handled it. She won't bother us anymore. I am so sorry you had to deal with that. Honey, I am coming home." I looked at the message, then at the pile of evidence on my desk. I safely ejected the hard drive and hid it inside the hollow base of a decorative lamp in the living room. I shut the laptop and walked to the kitchen. I ground fresh beans and started the coffee maker. The aroma filled the kitchen, smelling of normalcy. I poured myself a mug and sat at the kitchen island, wrapping my cold hands around the warm ceramic. I heard the garage door opener rumble to life. I took a sip of black coffee. It was bitter, just like the truth. I fixed my eyes on the door connecting the garage to the kitchen and waited. It was time for the performance of my life. Mark walked through the door at 6:30 in the morning. His shirt was rumpled, his hair was a mess, and his shoulders slumped in a posture of exaggerated defeat. It was a performance worthy of an award. "Sarah," he exhaled, dropping his keys on the counter with a heavy clatter. "I am so sorry. God, what a nightmare. I hate that she dragged you into this. I did not recoil when he reached for me. I forced my body to remain pliable, my face a mask of concern." I poured him a cup of coffee, playing the role of the doting wife one last time. Did you manage to calm her down?" I asked softly. "Is she okay?" Mark took a sip of coffee and shook his head, looking down at the black liquid to avoid my eyes. "She is completely out of her mind. She gave birth to a boy, but, Sarah, the baby isn't mine, obviously. She is just trying to blackmail me because she knows I am successful. She thinks she can pin this kid on me for a payout. I told her if she contacts us again, I am calling the cops immediately." I watched him over the rim of my own mug. The lie was smooth and practiced. "We should get a DNA test," I said. My voice was calm and helpful. Mark froze. The cup stopped halfway to his mouth. For a split second, the mask slipped, revealing sheer terror in his eyes. "What to protect your honor, Mark," I continued, leaning in earnestly. "If she is unstable, she might go to the press or try to sue us. A negative DNA test is the ultimate shield. We should request one today." "No," he said, too quickly. He cleared his throat and tried to laugh, but it sounded brittle. "No, honey, that is a waste of money. We don't need to indulge her delusions. Ignoring her is the best strategy." "I disagree," I said, my voice hardening just enough to sound practical, not suspicious. "I don't want to live in fear of a lawsuit. I want legal proof. It costs a few $100s. Surely our peace of mind is worth that." Mark looked at me, searching for any sign that I knew the truth. I gave him nothing but concern. "Fine," he muttered, looking away. I will look into it later. I need to shower. As soon as he went upstairs, I left for the office. I did not go to my usual meetings. Instead, I locked my office door and made a call to Veronica Sharp. She was the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city, famous for flaying cheating husbands in court. I need a consultation. I told her receptionist. Today. It involves significant assets and fraud. While I waited for her callback, I logged into the county clerk's online portal. I needed to check the deed to our house. My heart pounded as I downloaded the most recent documents. There, dated 6 months ago, was a lien against our property. Mark had taken out a second mortgage for $200,000. I stared at the signature on the bottom of the page. It spelled Sarah Sullivan, but the loops on the letter S were wrong. He had forged my signature. He had stolen the equity from the home I had paid for to fund his escape plan. My desk phone rang, startling me. I expected it to be Veronica's office. "This is Sarah," I answered professionally. "Hello? Is this Mark Sullivan's wife?" A male voice on the other end sounded shaky, thick with unshed tears. "Yes, this is she. Who is this?" "My name is Jason," the man said. There was a pause, and I heard him take a ragged breath. I am Amanda's fiancé. Or I was. Until last night." I gripped the phone tighter. "Why are you calling me Jason?" "Because I was at the hospital too," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "I thought that baby was mine. But then she told me everything. I have pieces of this puzzle that you are missing. Sarah, we need to meet." I looked at the forged mortgage document on my screen. Name the place. Jason. I met Jason at a small, dimly lit coffee shop 30 minutes outside the city limits, a place where the baristas did not know my order or my face. He was sitting in the back corner, staring into a cold cup of tea. He looked nothing like the villain in a soap opera. He had soft eyes and slumped shoulders, the posture of a man whose world had just been incinerated. He looked kind, and that made it worse. "Sarah," he asked as I approached, half standing. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Jason," I replied, sitting opposite him. "Tell me." He took a shaky breath, running a hand through his messy hair. "We were engaged. I bought a ring. I thought that little boy was mine. We picked out names. We painted the nursery." He choked on the words, looking away to hide the tears welling up. "Then yesterday, at the hospital, Mark showed up. She looked at me and she said, 'I am sorry. Jason, he isn't yours. He is my ticket to a better life.'" He slid a manila envelope across the scarred wooden table. I opened it. Inside were photographs printed on glossy paper. There was Mark, shirtless and laughing, holding a cocktail in a pool. Next to him was Amanda, wearing a bikini and a sun hat, her hand resting possessively on his chest. The date stamp was from last November. "Cabo," I whispered, the nausea rising in my throat. He told me he was at a structural engineering conference in Denver. He called me every night complaining about the snow. "They have been planning this for a long time," Jason said, his voice hardening with a mix of sorrow and rage. "It is not just an affair. Sarah, it is a heist. Amanda told me. She told me that Mark said you were cold, that you were an emotionless workaholic who didn't care about family. He convinced her that you didn't deserve the money you made. He told her they were just taking back what the universe owed him for putting up with you." I stared at the photo of my husband's smiling face. He had demonized me to justify his greed. He had turned me into a villain so he could feel like a hero while he robbed me blind. "She isn't innocent," Jason continued, wiping his face with a napkin. "She went along with it, but Mark is the architect. He coached her on what to say, how to hide the money. She thinks they are going to run away together once your accounts are drained." I looked up at Jason. In his eyes, I saw the same reflection of betrayal that I felt in my own heart. I want to destroy him, I said, my voice low and steady. Not just leave him. I want to leave him with nothing, Jason nodded slowly. I want to help. I can keep playing the heartbroken ex. She still talks to me because she feels guilty. I can find out what their next move is. And I will handle the money, I said, tucking the envelope into my purse. We are going to burn their little fantasy to the ground. I drove home with the envelope burning a hole in my passenger seat. When I walked through the front door, the smell of garlic and roasting herbs hit me. Mark was in the kitchen, wearing an apron, chopping vegetables with a cheerful rhythm. He looked up and smiled. The picture of domestic bliss. "Hey, honey," he chirped. "I made your favorite, roasted chicken with rosemary. I thought we both needed a nice, quiet evening after the craziness of last night." The sight of him standing there, acting as if he hadn't just destroyed 2 families, made my skin crawl. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced a tired smile onto my face. "That smells wonderful, Mark." He wiped his hands on a towel and walked over to the counter where a stack of papers lay waiting. "Oh, before we eat, I need you to sign these. It is just some boring paperwork for restructuring our investment portfolio. I found some funds with better yields, but I need your authorization to move the assets. It has to be done by tomorrow morning to lock in the rates." I glanced at the papers. It was a durable power of attorney, granting him unrestricted access to sell, transfer, and liquidate every asset I owned. He was trying to clean me out before the divorce. I pressed 2 fingers to my temple and grimaced. "Mark, I have such a migraine. The stress from last night. I can barely see straight. I can't read legal jargon right now. It will only take a second." He pressed, the smile tightening at the corners. "Just sign at the bottom." I said no. I snapped, then softened my tone immediately. "I am sorry. My head is splitting. I will take a look at it tomorrow morning when I am fresh. Let's just eat." He hesitated, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face, but he quickly smoothed it over. "Of course, babe. Tomorrow is fine. Go wash up." I turned my back on him and walked toward the stairs, knowing his eyes were boring into my back, calculating exactly how much I was worth. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Veronica Sharp's office, but the atmosphere inside was as cold as a crypt. Veronica, a woman whose reputation for dismantling unfaithful spouses was legendary in the city, adjusted her rimless glasses and tossed the document I had brought her onto the polished mahogany desk. The paper landed with a heavy, final sound that echoed in the silence. "This is not an investment restructuring plan." "Sarah," Veronica said, her voice sharp and devoid of sympathy, "this is a durable power of attorney with a specific clause allowing for the immediate liquidation of real estate assets. If you had signed this, he could have sold your house out from under you by noon tomorrow and wired the proceeds to an offshore account before you even finished your lunch. It is a theft attempt, plain and simple." I felt a chill run down my spine, but I nodded. My suspicions were confirmed. Mark was not just leaving me, he was trying to obliterate me. "Do it," I said, my voice steady. "Execute the financial freeze." Under Veronica's supervision, I spent the next hour waging a silent war. I accessed my personal savings accounts and transferred every cent to a new, secure bank that Mark did not know existed. Then, I logged into the credit card portal. I reported the supplementary cards, the ones Mark carried in his wallet, as compromised. I froze them instantly. The financial lifeline he was using to fund his VIP lifestyle at the hospital was now severed. I left the law office and made one more call. I hired a private investigator named Miller, a man Jason had recommended. Miller was expensive, but he claimed to have contacts everywhere, including the janitorial staff at Memorial Hospital. I need a DNA sample from the infant in the maternity ward. I told him, "Room 302. Mark Sullivan is listed as the father." Consider it done, Miller replied. I will have a contact retrieve a used heel prick bandage from the biohazard waste before it is incinerated. The first crack in Mark's composure appeared at 2 in the afternoon. My phone buzzed on my desk. It was Mark. Sarah, he shouted the moment I picked up. I could hear the background noise of the hospital cafeteria. My credit card just got declined. I am standing here trying to pay for some private nursing care for that crazy woman because I just want to keep her calm, and the card is dead. It is humiliating. I leaned back in my chair, twirling a pen between my fingers. Oh no, I said, infusing my voice with a perfect dose of bewildered concern. I got a fraud alert text earlier. The bank said their system was compromised, so they froze all accounts for a 24-hour security audit. It is a nationwide glitch, apparently. I am so sorry, honey. I am on hold with them right now trying to fix it. 24 hours, Mark stammered, his voice rising in panic. I can't wait that long. I need to settle this bill now. Just pay cash if you have it, I suggested innocently. Or write a check. I am sure they will take a check. He hung up without saying goodbye. I knew he didn't have enough cash, and a check would leave a paper trail he was desperate to avoid. I went home early, entering the house quietly through the back door. I could hear Mark pacing in the guest bedroom upstairs. He must have come home to raid our emergency cash stash. I crept to the bottom of the stairs, straining to hear. She says it is a bank error, Mark was saying, his voice hushed and urgent. No, do not worry, Mandy. It is just a glitch. Listen to me. Tomorrow. She signs the papers tomorrow morning. Once she puts her name on that line, we will have access to the house equity. That is nearly $2 million. We will take the money and vanish before she even realizes the transfer went through. I retreated to the kitchen, my heart pounding not with fear, but with adrenaline. $2 million. That was the price tag he had put on our 5 years of marriage. I made noise opening the refrigerator, announcing my presence. When Mark came downstairs a few minutes later, he looked flustered but was trying to mask it. Hey, he said, forcing a smile. Did you fix the bank thing? They said it will be up by tomorrow morning. I lied. I walked over and placed a hand on his arm. Mark, I have been thinking, this whole situation with the stalker, it has been so stressful. We need to clear the air. I want to host a small dinner party tonight. Just a bad luck cleansing. Mark frowned. Tonight, Sarah. I don't think I invited your parents. I interrupted. And mine. I think having family around will help me relax. And, well, if I am going to sign those important papers for you tomorrow, I want to be in a good frame of mind. I want to feel like our future is secure. Mark's eyes lit up. He saw the bait. He thought that if our parents were here, I would be pressured into playing the role of the dutiful wife, making me pliable and easy to manipulate into signing the document. That is a great idea. Honey, he said, kissing my cheek. A family dinner. It will be perfect. He walked away to call his mother, already counting the money in his head. As he left the room, my phone chimed with a new email notification. It was from the genetic testing lab Miller had used. I opened the attachment. The subject line read, Paternity Test Results, Confidential. I scrolled to the bottom of the PDF. The text was bold and black. Probability of paternity 99, 0.9%. I stared at the number. It was the final nail in the coffin. I closed the email and started setting the table. I made sure to place Mark's seat at the head of the table, directly facing the large television screen mounted on the living room wall. It was going to be a dinner he would remember for the rest of his miserable life. The atmosphere in the dining room was thick enough to choke on, though nobody seemed to notice it but me. By 7 o'clock, the air was filled with the clinking of crystal glasses and the polite murmur of conversation. I had invited our inner circle. My parents were seated near the window, while Mark's parents, Linda and Robert, occupied the center of the table. Mark was putting on the performance of a lifetime. He moved around the table with the grace of a seasoned host, pouring a vintage Cabernet into his father's glass while simultaneously charming my mother with compliments about her dress. To the untrained eye, he was the picture of a devoted husband and a successful provider. But I was not looking with untrained eyes anymore. I watched him like a hawk. Every time he passed the mahogany sideboard where the stack of legal documents lay waiting, his eyes darted toward them. It was a hungry, desperate look, like a starving animal eyeing a piece of meat just out of reach. I made my entrance 10 minutes after the guests arrived. I had spent an hour in front of the vanity, applying a layer of makeup that was less like cosmetics and more like war paint. My dress was a structured black sheath that cost more than Mark's first car, and I wore the diamond earrings he had given me for our 3rd anniversary bout, I now knew, with money siphoned from our joint savings. "Sarah," darling Linda exclaimed as I walked in, clasping her hands together. "You look absolutely stunning. Mark was just telling us how hard you have been working lately. You two are such a power couple. We are so lucky to have a son who supports his wife's career so beautifully." Mark smiled, a tight, modest expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I just do what I can. Mom, Sarah is the real star." "He is modest," my father chimed in, raising his glass. To Mark, "A good man is hard to find these days." I accepted a glass of wine from Mark, my fingers brushing against his. His skin was cold and clammy. "To Mark," I said, my voice smooth and dangerous, "and to the truth." They all laughed, thinking it was a clever toast. Mark laughed the loudest, but I saw the bead of sweat trickling down his temple. My phone buzzed against my thigh, hidden in the folds of my dress. I slipped it out under the table. It was a message from Jason. "I just sent the audio file to your email. She confessed everything. It is brutal. Sarah, use it." I took a slow sip of wine. The adrenaline in my veins felt like ice water. I walked over to the corner of the room where our smart home hub was located, with a few taps. I silently paired my phone to the surround sound speakers that were currently playing soft jazz. I queued up the file Jason had sent, but I pressed pause. Not yet. Mark saw me near the electronics and immediately stiffened. He abandoned his conversation with his father and hurried over to me, guiding me toward the sideboard. "Honey," he whispered, his voice strained, "before we sit down for the main course, maybe we should get that paperwork out of the way. It is just a quick signature. Then we can celebrate properly. It is a gift for our future. Remember." He held out his favorite fountain pen. The gold nib glinted under the chandelier light. I looked at the pen, then at the document titled Asset Restructuring and Power of Attorney. I looked at my parents, who were happily chatting, completely unaware that their daughter was standing on a precipice. Then I looked at Mark. His eyes were wide, pleading, and filled with a naked greed that he could no longer hide. He thought he had won. He thought I was the same naive woman who had married him 5 years ago. "You are right," I said loud enough for the table to hear. The conversation died down as everyone turned to look at us. "We should settle our future before dinner." Mark let out a breath he had been holding. "Exactly. Here." I took the pen. I leaned over the document. Mark hovered over my shoulder, practically vibrating with anticipation. He was already spending the $2 million in his head. I lowered the pen to the signature line. Mark leaned closer. Instead of signing my name, I pressed the nib hard into the paper, in large block letters that took up the entire bottom half of the page. I wrote 3 words: Plan B failed. I recapped the pen with a sharp click. Then, I picked up the document and flipped it around, shoving it directly into Mark's face. "Read it." "Mark," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried across the silent room. "Read it carefully." Mark's face went the color of old ash as his eyes locked onto the handwritten message. The blood drained from his lips so quickly I thought he might faint right there on the Persian rug. He made a desperate, jerky motion to snatch the paper back, his fingers hooking like claws. But I was already moving. I stood up smoothly, pulling the document out of his reach and clutching it to my chest like a shield. "Mark," his mother asked, her voice laced with sudden confusion. "Is everything all right? You look like you have seen a ghost." I didn't give him a chance to answer. I picked up a silver dessert spoon and tapped it gently against the crystal rim of my wine glass. The sharp, clear ringing sound cut through the tension, commanding the attention of the entire room. "Everyone, please, settle down," I said, beaming with a smile that felt sharp enough to cut glass. "I actually have a second announcement. It is not just about the house. I have some wonderful news about a new addition to the family." The reaction was instantaneous and precisely what I had calculated. My mother clasped her hands over her mouth, her eyes tearing up. Mark's father raised his glass high. "I knew it," Linda squealed, clapping her hands together. "I told Robert you two were hiding something. Oh, Sarah, how far along are you?" The room erupted in applause and laughter. Mark stood frozen in the center of the celebration, a statue of pure terror. Sweat was literally pouring down his forehead, soaking the collar of his expensive dress shirt. He looked at me with eyes that begged for mercy, but I had none left to give. "Actually, it is a bit more complicated than that," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "Let me show you." I pointed the remote control at the 75-inch television mounted above the fireplace. The screen flickered to life. The high-resolution image I had taken through the gap in the hospital blinds filled the room. It was undeniable. There was Mark, his face wet with tears of joy, cradling a newborn baby against his chest. Next to the photo, I projected the PDF of the paternity test results. I had highlighted the crucial line in bright yellow. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. The applause died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens after a bomb goes off, just before the screaming starts. Crash! The sound of shattering glass broke the spell. Linda had dropped her wine glass. Red Cabernet splashed across the beige carpet and splattered onto the hem of her cream-colored dress, looking disturbingly like an arterial spray. She stared at the screen, her mouth hanging open in a silent scream. "What is this?" my father asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Mark, what am I looking at?" "It is a lie," Mark shrieked, finding his voice at last. He pointed a shaking finger at me. She is faking it. She is jealous. That is Photoshop. Is the audio fake too?" "Mark," I asked calmly. I pressed the next button on the remote. The voice of my husband, clear and distinct, boomed through the surround sound speakers. "She is so stupid, Mandy. Honestly, it is pathetic how much she trusts me. Just hold on a little longer. Once the stupid bitch signs the power of attorney, we will take the $2 million and leave her with nothing but the debt. We will have everything." The recording echoed off the walls. "Stupid bitch. $2 million. Mark let out a guttural roar. "Turn it off. Turn it off right now." He lunged toward the television, his face twisted into a mask of violence. He looked ready to rip the screen off the wall, but he never made it. My father, a man of 60 who still chopped his own firewood, moved with surprising speed. He intercepted Mark, shoving him hard in the chest. Mark stumbled backward, losing his footing, and collapsed onto the leather sofa. My father stood over him, fists clenched, his face purple with rage. "You sit down," my father snarled, "or I will put you down." I walked to the center of the room, holding a stack of bank statements I had printed that morning. I felt incredibly light, as if gravity had ceased to exist. "You want to know where the money went?" I asked, looking directly at Mark's parents. He didn't just cheat on me, he stole from us. I tossed the first page onto the coffee table in front of him. $50,000 from my retirement fund for a down payment on a house for his mistress. I stated clearly. I tossed the next page. $12,000 for a diamond necklace. The one he told me he bought for you. Linda. Did you ever receive it? Linda shook her head slowly, tears streaming down her face, unable to speak. $7,000 for a luxury baby moon in Cabo. I continued, my voice relentless. While he told me he was at a conference in snowy Denver, I let the rest of the papers flutter down like confetti, covering him in the evidence of his betrayal. He forged my signature on a second mortgage, I said, turning to face his parents, who were huddled together on their chairs, looking small and broken. He emptied our savings. He tried to liquidate my assets tonight to run away with another woman. I looked Mark dead in the eye. He was curled up on the sofa, trembling, ruined. Your son is not just an adulterer, I declared, my voice ringing with finality. He is a financial predator. And he is a criminal. Mark scrambled backward on the sofa, his expensive loafers skidding on the hardwood floor as he tried to put distance between himself and the damning evidence scattered around him. He looked like a cornered rat. His eyes darted from his father's furious face to my impassive one, searching for a lifeline that simply did not exist. Sarah, baby, please listen to me, he stammered, his hands shaking violently as he reached out toward me. It is not what it looks like. That woman, she is a predator. She seduced me. She found out who I was and she set a trap. I was weak. I admit it. But I was trying to get out. She threatened to tell you everything if I didn't pay her. I was trying to protect you. I did not say a word. I simply turned my head toward the hallway leading to the front door. You can come in now, I called out clearly. The front door opened, and Jason stepped into the light of the dining room. He looked tired, but resolved. Mark's jaw dropped. The blood that had already drained from his face somehow seemed to vanish further, leaving him looking like a wax figure. Jason, Mark whispered, Why are you here? Jason walked past the stunned guests and stood directly over Mark. He looked down at my husband with a mixture of pity and revulsion. Stop lying, Mark, Jason said, his voice thick with emotion. Just stop. Amanda showed me the texts. She played me the voicemails. She didn't seduce you. You groomed her. You told her exactly what to say to the bank tellers. You told her that Sarah was a monster who trapped you in a loveless marriage. She did everything you said because she thought you loved her. But you were just using her as a vessel to launder stolen money. Mark opened his mouth to argue, but the sound of his father's voice cut through the air like a whip crack. Enough Robert Sullivan, a man who had served in the Marines and raised his son to have integrity, stepped forward. He looked at Mark as if he were looking at a stranger he wanted to remove from his property. You are a disgrace, Robert said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. You have shamed this family. You have shamed your name. Do not look at me. Do not look at your mother. As of this moment, I have no son. Mark flinched as if he had been struck. He turned to his mother, but Linda turned her face away, sobbing into her napkin, unable to even look at him. Panic truly set in then. Mark realized his support system had evaporated. He turned back to me, tears streaming down his face, dropping to his knees on the Persian rug. Sarah, please. I am begging you, he sobbed, crawling forward and grabbing the hem of my dress. It was a mistake. It was just a midlife crisis. I was scared of getting old. I was scared of the pressure. We can fix this. I can pay the money back. Don't throw away 5 years because of one stupid mistake. I looked down at him. I felt absolutely nothing. The love I had once held for him had been incinerated, leaving only cold ash. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a thick envelope. I dropped it onto the floor in front of his knees. These are divorce papers, I said, my voice as cold as the grave. I drafted them this morning, and the paper underneath is a temporary restraining order. You are not to come within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. Before Mark could touch the envelope, red and blue lights flashed through the sheer curtains of the living room window, painting the walls in a chaotic rhythm. A siren wailed briefly and then cut off. And that, I said, stepping back, is for the fraud. Two uniformed officers and a detective in a cheap suit walked through the open front door. My lawyer, Veronica, had timed it perfectly. Mark Sullivan, the detective asked, holding up a badge. We have a warrant for your arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and forgery in the second degree. Mark scrambled to his feet, looking for a back exit, but the officers were on him in seconds. They spun him around and slammed him against the wall, pulling his arms behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. No, you can't do this, Mark screamed, thrashing against the officers as they dragged him toward the door. He twisted his neck to look at me, his face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. You planned this, you bitch, you cold-hearted, evil bitch. You set me up. I stood perfectly still, watching him being hauled out into the night like the garbage he was. I did not shed a single tear. As the door slammed shut and the sirens began to wail again, fading into the distance, I felt a physical weight lift from my chest. It was over. The tumor was removed. The room was deadly silent. I turned slowly to face the devastation of the dinner party. My parents looked shocked but proud. Mark's parents looked destroyed. I am so sorry, I said softly to the room. I am sorry you all had to witness this. I am sorry for ruining the evening. Linda stood up shakily. She walked over to me, her eyes swollen and red. I braced myself for blame, but she pulled me into a fierce, desperate hug. No, Sarah. She wept into my shoulder. I am the one who is sorry. I am so sorry. It took exactly 90 days for the gavel to fall. Thanks to the mountain of digital forensic evidence and the confession tapes I had secured, the trial was less of a legal battle and more of a public execution of Mark's character. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for financial abuse, did not hesitate. Mark stood before the bench in a suit that hung loosely on his frame. His arrogance completely eroded. He received nothing, no spousal support, no share of the house, and absolutely no sympathy. Instead, he was saddled with the entirety of the debt he had accrued and ordered to pay restitution. For the counts of wire fraud and forgery, the judge sentenced him to 3 years in federal prison. I hope you use this time to reflect on the cost of your greed, Mr. Sullivan, the judge had said, banging the gavel with a finality that echoed in my bones. Amanda did not escape the blast radius. While she avoided jail time by testifying against Mark, the court ordered the immediate liquidation of the assets Mark had purchased for her to pay back the stolen funds. She had to sell the house and move into a small rental apartment. She was now raising a newborn alone, without the fortune she had gambled her dignity for, struggling to make ends meet in a city that had no pity for accomplices. I kept the suburban villa. The very next day, I hired a contractor to gut the master bedroom. I tore up the carpets Mark had walked on and painted over the walls he had looked at every morning. I replaced the furniture with bold, modern pieces that reflected my taste, not our compromise. I scrubbed his ghost from every corner of my sanctuary until the house felt like mine again. My professional life flourished in the wake of the chaos. My boss at Prism Line called me into his office a week after the sentencing. Sarah, he said, leaning back in his chair with a look of genuine admiration. Anyone who can dismantle a sophisticated financial fraud scheme while maintaining perfect attendance and delivering a winning pitch deserves to run the whole department. You are senior partner now. I met Jason for coffee last Tuesday. He looked healthier, the shadows under his eyes replaced by a look of cautious optimism. We are not dating, but we share a bond that is perhaps stronger than romance. We are the survivors of the wreckage. We made it out, didn't we? Jason asked, clinking his mug against mine. I think I am finally ready to move on, to new beginnings, I replied with a smile. Real ones this time. I sat in my new corner office overlooking the city skyline, the afternoon sun bathing the room in gold. My phone chimed on the desk. It was a notification from my bank. Restitution deposit received $50,000. I stared at the screen and a small, ironic smile touched my lips. Mark's initial lie, that the baby was not his, was meant to be the trap that secured his freedom and my money. In the end, that innocent child was the catalyst that burned his world down and set me free. The baby he denied was the reason I woke up. I turned off my phone and stood up. I grabbed my bag and walked out of the office, stepping into the elevator. When the doors opened to the street, the sunlight hit my face, warm and brilliant. I took a deep breath of fresh air, ready for a chapter that truly belonged to me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below, sharing your location and your thoughts on Mark's karma. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel. Like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people.